Krishna bhaktaya tad bhaktaya namo namah. So, pranam to all of you from Sri Radha-Kunda in Vrindavan. Here, yeah, we have been for a few days already, almost less than a week, but planning to stay a whole week here, staying at the house of a dear friend of mine, Radha-Madhav Prabhu. I'm here at his office now, so we have a typical Brajavasi background here, so you believe me that I'm in India. So welcome. So glad to be with all of you for Istagosti after 1 week of not being able to be there. Sorry for that one, but as you may recall, we lost. I mean, we didn't lose any flight, but just the flights were delayed for 3 hours, and then the other flight was 3 hours more, and we ended up arriving at Vrindavan at almost 9 p.m. So, but I heard you have a very blessed gathering and sharing, so that was a beautiful arrangement in itself. That's it. Happy to be back. So, welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for blessing the gathering with your presence, for making basically an act of presence, statement of presence by being here today, and adding your own spice to the masala of this circle. And embracing the principle of satsanga, right? Of befriending truth, basically. No? Satsanga will be basically that, no? Trying to continue developing our loving, friendly relationship with things as they are. Sat. Sat, basically, those 3 small letters speak about that, about the passion to befriend things as they are, to make peace with reality as reality chooses and needs to manifest in our lives, and as we need to welcome it and embrace it and integrate it. So let's continue making peace with it, and let's continue developing our passionate pursuit of the truth, which ultimately is love. No, particularly where I am now, Sri Radha-Kunda, in one sense we could say, is the epicenter of that principle. Radha-Kunda is basically the liquid personified thick manifestation of Sri Radha in the form of a place, in the form of a lake, in the form of a fluid substance. And love is the ultimate truth. Love is the ultimate sat. And her passion about truth, about love, is unparalleled, basically. She's a personification of passionate pursuit of the truth through love, through the ultimate means to ascertain reality and honor and serve it, loving it. So, yeah, I hope somehow the influence of this blessed place may gain its way through my words in one way or another. So that's it. Welcome again to all of you. And I see a few hands raised. We can begin there. And let's see where the dhara takes us. Interestingly, Radha, if you repeat it a few times, becomes dhara. And dhara in Sanskrit means current. So it speaks about how Radha, love personified, constantly flows uninterruptedly in this passionate pursuit. So Radha, dhara. Let's hope both of them may embrace us today. So Lakshmi Priya, Mayapur Sangam, some of you too. I don't know, Zoom is not able to indicate whose digital hand is the one raised, but Mayapur Sangam is making that very clear. Plus Lakshmi Priya as well. So Lakshmi Priya has a question, it has become evident. So you're invited to present it, please.
Haribol Maharaj, we are very happy that you're back. So pranams to everybody present. Maharaj, I have a question. I mean, I have written you what's going on more or less, but we are getting prepared for my guru leaving his body. Probably like his health is indicating that at least. But now I'm confronted with a question that I don't know how to solve. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says we should not lament for these things like losing somebody. Well, it's a very easy way to say it, that mostly that we should not lament because we are eternal. And on the other hand, I see that in our tradition, like in the Vedic culture, when somebody leaves, for example, in the rituals, women are not allowed to cry, for example, because that might disturb. Like I heard that if you cry during the ceremony when the person is getting burned, the soul might get attached and cannot leave. So I see a lot of things going against this expression of pain. How to deal with that? Because on one side, we should not lament because we cannot limit the guru to a body, or we cannot limit the soul to a material body. But yeah, on the other hand, it is quite painful to lose somebody. That's my question.
Yes, yes. Well, yeah, first of all, I don't know. I'm thinking a few seconds of silent prayer for Lakshmi Priya's Gurudev and for Lakshmi Priya herself to navigate this transition in a healthy way, in a blessed way, in a sheltered way, because it's one of the most difficult chapters in the life of a disciple. So first of all, I feel the inspiration. So we all, the present ones here now, we can for a moment join in prayer for invoking well-wishing and mercy and shelter for this transition to go as smoothly as possible for everyone. So in connection to your question, of course, I think it's very important to make a very clear difference when we talk about lamentation, which type of lamentation we are talking about. Because, I mean, at the same time, there's so much lamentation going on in the Lila forever in the context of divine love. As I say many times on a daily basis, Radha and Krishna are in separation from each other, and they are lamenting, they are crying, there are so many verses that, for example, I think it's Radha-Rasa Sudhanidhi, if I'm not mistaken, which says that if you put all the suffering of this world together, that doesn't compute with one single moment of lamentation of Sri Radha in separation from Krishna. So we don't have an idea what it means to lament when we love. When we love, everything happens, how to say, in its real form, right? When we don't love, our so-called love is not love. And when we don't love, our so-called lamentation is not real lamentation. When we love, whatever happens, be it love, joyful, celebration, lamentation, it all happens from its proper context. So there is a place for lamentation. I mean, in fact, indeed, I mean, lamentation, a healthy lamentation is a proof that you value what you have lost. If you want to use the word lost, in this case, I'm not saying you are losing your guru, but it's a form of loss in one way. You know, you're losing the physical dimension of association, let's put it that way. Of course, the idea is that loss is inviting to a deeper level of gain and rediscovering the connection with that person on a more essential level. So at the end of the day, there's no loss. There's only gain from the proper perspective. But there is place for lamenting on the loss. We hear these songs from our Vaishnava acharyas, I don't know, Narottam Das Thakur singing in separation from all his friends and associates, and he's lamenting when Rai Ramananda is having this back and forth short questions and answers with Mahaprabhu after the Ramananda Sambad, after the conversation, historical conversation they have. And Mahaprabhu is asking, what suffering to Ramananda Roy? And he said, Krishna Bhakta Piraha Bina Dukkha Nahi Ar, which basically means, apart from separation from a Krishna Bhakta, I know of no other suffering. So he's making the point, like, if you are in separation from a Vaishnava, what to speak of your guru, what to speak if the guru has left his body or is in the process of that, there is a place for dukkha, for pain, for suffering, and lamentation is basically that. So it's not only is not bad, it's good, it's natural. If I love someone, it's a symptom of affection. That said, of course, we also find these statements in scripture about, in Bhagavad Gita, you refer to, where Krishna is telling Arjuna not to lament. But again, we have to understand, he's not telling Arjuna not to lament at all in any form, but he's just pointing to the fact that we can lament in ways that are symptoms of affection, as the ones we are describing now, or we can lament, in Prabhupada's words, for that which is not worthy of lamentation. And that's the main issue here. Now, here, Bhagavad Gita and Vedic tradition, Gaudiya Vaishnavism is not about emotional repression. It's not about canceling what needs to be expressed, what needs to come naturally, but preventing not overindulging, let's put it that way, in certain avenues which could be prevented and which do not end up in a healthy horizon, so to say. Like, for example, we have ever-evolving, as I like to say, potential into the brightest heights of life, existence, ecstasy, transcendence, but we also have ever devolving potential. So we can go down without limits. So we can lament in the wrong direction without limits. I mean, I think we all know we all have had a glimpse of how much we can bury ourselves layer after layer after layer into lamenting for things that are not worthy of lamentation. The very expression, do not lament for that which is not worthy of lamentation, indirectly is indicating there is something which is worthy of being lamented for. So we are not saying here, do not lament. Just do not lament in a way that is toxic, in a way that is escapism, evasiveness, that is just increasing the tamasic experience and makes you depressed, and you go into a trip of toxic nostalgia, and you go try to leave the past and make the past replace the present, all these type of things. Those can be toxic lamentation. And those are not symptoms of love. Those are not increasing your appreciation and gratitude for the object of your lamentation, but it's a self-centered darkness. Let's put it that way. It's a darkness that has you as the main reference point. So it's just spiraling down into more and more dark expressions of that same thing. So that's the type of lamentation that Krishna is preventing us from. Now, not Arjuna, of course. Again, it's all about us, not about Arjuna. So regarding what you mentioned about women not crying because that may affect the soul who is departing, I never heard about that. That's interesting. But even if that's the case, again, I wouldn't make that a universal rule that everyone has to be like that, because I will just take the essence of that, which is, okay, you have a concern that person who is transitioning may have the smoothest possible transition. So let's try to accompany, to be empathic with the journey of that person, and to be more concentrated on blessing and accompanying that person who is in that transition. Not repress and deny what you are going through, but again, do not make your own experience the all in all, so to say, the center of the whole thing. Especially if you love a person and you know that person is going through a very particular transition called leaving the body, you want to be present for that person. You may have your feelings and emotions, but maybe in that moment you will be more willing to be empathic with what that person is going through and with accompanying in the best possible way. No? So I would say that's the spirit of that type of advice. It's not so much like, hey, stop crying. We are not supposed to cry. you're sending that person back to samsara because of your tears. No, it's all you're responsible. That's, and again, and all that applies to a certain level of consciousness, so to say. We want to, just now before coming here, I was talking with another devotee that I just got to know, who is in the next room, because here I'm in Radha Madhav's office, so there's another room next. So I was talking with the devotee that Radha Madhav introduced with me, Mantra Rupa Prabhu, a very interesting Vaishnava scholar, researcher. And we were talking about how many times he made a very simple, interesting point. He said, if you really study Shastra and understand it in context, you will get this idea that generally most of us won't take a lower birth after this birth. No. Generally, if you pay attention to all the things that in scriptures say about just once chanting or associating or bathing in the Ganges or taking prasad, like the unlimited, like how to say, mercy that's coming through that, the merciful nature of Mahaprabhu, of Sri Radha, if you understand how much grace is already coming, you can understand that, yeah, it's almost not possible for you to degrade yourself to a lower, to a different form than human form in your next life. See, he was kind of making that point, like implying many times we underestimate the power of mercy, and we overestimate, as I like to say, maybe our own anarthas. But I like to say, if you put all your anarthas put together in one side of the scale, and just one drop of Mahaprabhu's mercy, where will the scale tip on? What's more powerful, in other words, divine grace of your own, or your own darkness? So sometimes we overestimate our own darkness. And I'm saying all this in the context of what we are talking now, because sometimes, okay, Vaishnav, sadhu, advanced senior elder is passing from this world, and I wouldn't be that much concerned about, oh, maybe we have to be careful, do not cry, because maybe he will be back, or as and be born who knows where and what will happen. No, like if those like casual, random details may affect the trajectory and how to say, triumph over divine grace, Krishna's unconditional love, and all the things he says in scripture about how he loves his devotees, how he reciprocates, how my devotee name bhakta pranashati. Krishna says in the Gita to Arjuna, promise that my devotee will never perish. Do say it yourself, be convinced about it. There's no loss or diminution in this path. So many statements in Shastra to give us this confidence, healthy confidence, that I'm on the path to success. I'm on the way home, basically. So I don't need to freak out about all these technicalities about whether someone is crying or not, because maybe if not, that will make our guru or whomever go down. I mean, that's applicable on some degree, and again, with a certain intent that I already shared before. But when we are talking about, the intervention of grace and people who have dedicated their life to open themselves to grace in the best possible way they could, I mean, that's the main consideration to keep in mind, basically. That's the thing that we need to estimate. Not to overestimate, just to estimate, and to estimate the power of grace, that's in itself it's overwhelming. But sometimes we are very expert in underestimating that. Even in our own daily journey, we lose sight of how much grace and blessings are filling our day. And we just concentrate on the dark things, like this. So many researches about that. It's so easier for us to relate to negative emotions. We have way more words for negative emotions than for positive emotions. Our mind goes quickly to negative emotions and stays there almost forever. And when you go to a positive emotion, it's like Teflon. No, Teflon is positive emotion. You can click. And negative emotions is like Velcro, he will say, no? No, it stays there. No? So yeah, those will be some considerations that come to mind. And yeah, trying to go through this transition with not focusing on these details, but understanding yeah, there's a place for proper lamentation. There's a place to show my love and my affection through tears, whatever needs to come in that moment. It's a testimony of love. So that's nothing bad. That's not the type of lamentation sometimes we are prevented about. And yeah, but and not only there's lamentation, I would like to use the word grieving, no, which is a very important word that many times is not in our vocabulary that often. And the grieving is not only in the transition of the passing of a beloved one, but then after the passing, there is a whole period of that. There are many ancient traditions that will have these official moments of grieving, like after this happened, now you go and grieve for a few weeks. I mean, many cultures just don't do anything else but grieve, no? Like enter that space, no, remain in that space, go deep into that space, so you can reconnect and rediscover what you are grieving about in a new layer, in a new form, so you can continue the relationship from a new perspective. But you need the grieving which shed light on how the relationship is moving forward in this new chapter. Probably if we don't spend time for properly grieving, we are missing, we are not able to keep the pace of the person who has transitioned, and we are bewildered about, okay, so where is he now or she now, disappear, how to relate, what's going on? No, and probably because we haven't grieved properly. We haven't integrated and internalized that particular chapter, and that's affecting how we move forward to the next chapter. So for me, we should give ourselves permission and others to grieve as much as that's required. For example, in our tradition, I'm not saying it's an absolute rule, but you will see many places that, for example, when a guru leaves her body, many times, even if there is some successor acharya or someone continues or not, but for a whole year, there's this type of tradition that for a whole year after the passing of the guru, nobody's giving initiation to anyone. Like that function becomes paused for a year, no? Like indirectly implying, okay, time to grieve. Try to integrate, time to rediscover Gurudev beyond the physicality. This takes time. This takes grieving. No? Stands it like that, and some of them may even follow it just as a custom. Okay, 1 year without doing this, and then we can start. But I will say that the spirit goes in that direction. No? Some hibernation, so to say, and entering deep into some considerations. So anyhow, some thoughts. I hope that helps, Lakshmi Priya.
Thank you, Maharaj, for the explanation. I feel much relief. And thank you also for your prayers and good wishes, and also to everybody else. So I feel very blessed by it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we all need blessings at every moment and at every stage of our journey, especially in transitions. So losing dear ones in one way or another, whether physically or losing relationships, those are rites of passage in their own way. So it's important that we remain open, so we are marked by those moments in a way that warrants a blessed movement to the next chapter, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj.
So next question. Quest, exploration, from Bhadra, from New Zealand.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. Great to
Hare
see you
Krishna.
back. Missed you last week, but nonetheless, it was a very deep and enriching Sangha.
Okay, if you say so, I believe you.
Now, I have a question about the name Vishnu. We have in the Bhagavatam the shloka, Ete Changsha.
I'm not sure if I am understanding correctly. I understood Vishnu and Bhagavatam, but nothing between them.
Okay, the shloka of Bhagavatam, Ete Changsha
Kalapumsa.
Kalapumsaha. Yes, Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam.
Ah,
Why is Krishna known all over Hinduism and even in many dictionaries as the eighth avatar of Vishnu? That's one part of the question. And the other part is, why are we as Krishna bhaktas or aspiring Krishna bhaktas known as Vaishnavas? Shouldn't we be Krishnavas? So that's my question. Those are two-part question.
yeah, thank you. So there's lots to say there. For an expanded answer, you can go to the Krishna Sandarbha of Jiva Goswami, basically, where he expands in detail. Of course, he first has his Tattva Sandarbha, Bhagavat Sandarbha, Paramatma Sandarbha, and then comes Krishna Sandarbha. He first establishes, of course, the Bhagavatam as the perfect praman or epistemological means for us Gaudiyas, and then speaks about Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan, Jiva, Maya Shakti, and then Krishna Sandarbha is the Krishna treatise. No? So he speaks about Krishna and how Krishna is Swayam Bhagavan, referring to this famous verse, and so on and so forth. So that's a recommended reading. So this line you are referring to, Ete Chamsa Kalapumsha Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam, which is a line that appears once in the Bhagavatam. And some people may think, okay, you Gaudiya Vaishnavas we are making too much out of that line. And yeah, we do. But too much doesn't mean that we are inventing something. It's just like we are discovering something. And again, it's not that because it appears only once in the Bhagavatam, it's less important that if it will appear more. Jiva Goswami shows, again, Krishna Sandarbha and throughout, how the whole, in one sense, Bhagavatam can revolve around that particular line. How the whole Bhagavatam, and not only the Bhagavatam, but the whole Veda, Vedanta, and so on, can be understood in the context of this line, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam, that Srila Prabhupada will translate as Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Or more specifically, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam is Krishna is Bhagavan when Bhagavan wants to be himself. Swayam. Bhagavan could be a word for God, and Swayam is himself. So when God wants to be himself, how you call that Krishna? Right? Because one thing is when God is God. That's Vishnu. Vaikuntha, cosmic administrator, big guy. Universal CEO, whatever. But when God wants to be himself, his own, who he is, the president of the United States is the president of the United States, but when he's at home in intimacy, he's himself. So who is God when God wants to be himself? Okay, that we call Krishna, more specifically Braja Krishna. And ultimately for us Gaudiya Vaishnavas, the case will be not so much Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam, but Braja Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Because also we have Dwarka Krishna, Mathura Krishna, Kurukshetra Krishna, this Krishna, Hastinapura Krishna, so many Krishnas. But the Bhagavatam case clearly made in 10th canto, and in the zenith of the 10th canto, which is Braja Leelas, Braja Krishna Stu Bhagavan Swayam. And of course, I say Radha for some reason. So Radha Krishna Stu Bhagavan Swayam. When Krishna is next to Sri Radha, then we can talk about himself for who he is ultimately. So again, there are different scriptures. This is a big important point that Jiva Goswami brings in his Tattva Sandarbha. You will find different scriptures and different statements in different Puranas about different forms of God. And this is God, and this is God, and this form is God, this form is the Supreme. So Jiva Goswami makes it clear. The different Shastras are talking to different people influenced by different modes of nature, Tamas, Rajas, Sattva. For example, Shiva Purana says Shivastu Bhagavan Swayam. If you are not in touch, you say, oh, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam, we have the line, nobody has that line. And Shaiva will say, well, Shiva Purana says Shiva is two Bhagavan Swaya. So we can make the same case ourselves. Yes, of course, and in one sense also the different other sections. I won't go into every section where different forms of the absolute that highlighted as the ultimate, because also one point in all this emphasis is, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Ye atmam prapadyanti tam sataiva vajamyaham. As you approach me, I reciprocate. So if you worship certain form of the divine with this faith, this is the real thing, you will be reciprocated with the faith that will make you feel that's the case. No, again, as I say, Hanuman worships Ram and feels he's the ultimate of the ultimate, and he's convinced of that, and he's right in his own way. You cannot just travel to Ayodhya and try to convince Hanuman that he's in Maya. No, as I like to say, inhabitants in Vaikuntha will feel Narayan is the greatest of the greatest, and Krishna is an avatar of Narayan. And there's a place for that, because that's taking place in eternity. That it's not that they are faulty, they have a misunderstanding about who Krishna is, and therefore they had to fall from Vaikuntha at one point because of that, or who knows what. No, they are eternally there. Vaikuntha means no fear, no anxiety, no falling down, just in case. No, imagine if people keep falling from Vaikuntha. You cannot call that place Vaikuntha. You have to look for some other name. Call it Sakunta, full of anxiety. You may be the next one falling. Who knows? Another topic. So I'm saying this because there's place to speak about Krishna as an avatar of Vishnu. The Vaikuntha Vasis think like that, and there's a place for them being correct, because they think like that in transcendence, in the spiritual world, from the subjective perspective of their love for Bhagavan. Now, our particular subjective perspective is different, and we have made our case, I would say, pretty convincingly, for the fact that Krishna is the source of all forms of God. This doesn't mean that we have to go and try to convince every other sampradaya they are wrong and we are the only ones who are right. That will be dangerous fanaticism. I'm missing the whole point. But if I'm a Gaudiya Vaishnava, and if I'm worshiping Radha and Krishna, saying Krishna is tu Bhagavan Swayam, that means that I have a faith in that. I have my arguments for that. I have my way of seeing and experiencing him, why Krishna is the ultimate form of the Godhead. No, and the Goswamis have elaborated on that. Rupa Goswami and his concept of rasa, and how the experience of rasa, or sacred aesthetic rapture, is experienced with Krishna at the utmost level. No other form of the divine offers that experience of rasa to such a broad and deep degree, and no other form of the divine experiences himself or herself that experience to such a broad and deep degree. So there are ways to make that case, but again, there are ways also to be respectful of other moods and experiences. Like I like to say sometimes, okay, we can make a very solid case for the fact that Krishna, Radha-Krishna, Braja Lila is the sweetest of the sweetest. Maduram, 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 like this famous verse will say. At one point, the author just has to resort to that word, Maduram, 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 sweet, 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 sweet. But again, okay, we can convince everyone about that fact, but some people will say, well, but do you know what? I don't like sweet that much. That's too sweet for my taste. No. So I don't like mango. It's too sweet. I don't like that much mango. I like apple. So what can you do? You cannot force them to like mango more. Now, that's their particular inner tongue in this case. So sweetest doesn't mean the best for me, right? So there are different ways to accommodate this. But yeah, we Gaudiya Vaishnavas will make that point. Some scriptures will address other people's faith and mentalities, and therefore in those cases some other forms of the divine will be highlighted, and some other forms will be shown in subservience to that highlighted form. And there again, there is place for that. It's not an insult to my deity. We have to be wise enough to understand from which place that's been done in a tasteful way. according to one's subjective faith and experience. So we should, in other words, we should be able, if you meet a Sri Vaishnava, let's put it this way, who thinks that Krishna is an avatar of Vishnu, we should be able to appreciate their explanation of how that's the case. And we shouldn't feel like pressed to, I have to convince him that's not the case. I have to refute him in debate. I have to prove him wrong. If all that happens, it only speaks about our quality of faith, and not that the other party is wrong or something. Remember, no, once over and over again, I refer to Brihad Bhagavatamrita, the first book in the Gaudiya Sampradaya, and that sets the notes for so many things. And one of those being Gopakumar has as his Ishta Devata Madan Gopal Krishna in Vrindavan as a friend. But in his journey, he goes through so many other forms of devotion, and he appreciates all of them. And he integrates his experience with all of them. And he makes those integrated experiences part of his own journey, which eventually culminates in Vrindavan. So he didn't need to refute all the people on his way. And he's not taking Hanuman and Shiva and Indra and everyone with him to Vrindavan, and all of you surrender to Madan Gopal, the real thing. He's not doing that. He's nourished and rich by that, grateful for that, incorporating those things and making them part of his journey. So that's very exemplary. And that's, again, the first book in the Gaudiya Sampradaya, telling the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, okay, you are expected to do something like that in your own way. So that's one thing. And regarding the second question, and again, I'm being brief, so many things could be said. Okay, we are worshipping Krishna, where Istadeva is not Vishnu. In Vaikuntha, in general, that's not Gaudiya Sampradaya's main focus, although there's breadth and depth by Mahaprabhu's grace, and everyone is welcome in their own way. So why we call ourselves Vaishnavas? Right? Because Vaishnava is the worshipper of Vishnu. So if we worship Krishna, we should be called Karshnas. That's the technical correct term to use. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur once addressed this. There are a few things to say. What he said was, okay, we are not, actually he said, we are not Vaishnavas. We are Vaishnavas, but we are not Vaishnavas, he will say. We are not even Karshnas, which means someone who worships Vishnu is a Vaishnava. He says someone who worships Krishna is a Karshna. And someone who worships Radha is a Gaudiya, he will say. So we are Gaudiyas. Or sometimes he will use the word Shaktas. Sometimes you have the term Shaktas, those who worship Shakti or Devi. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur will say, we are Shuddha Shaktas. Shuddha Shaktas. We are worshippers of the pure potency of Sri Radha, the Adi Shakti, the original form of the Devi, of the goddess. So there are different ways to say it. You can say, I'm a Shuddha Shakta, I'm a Gaudiya, or even you can say, I'm a Vaishnava, but understanding Vishnu with more nuance. Because Vishnu, of course, Vishnu is a name that we usually relate to Bhagavan in Vaikuntha. Let's put it this way, Naishvarya, Vishnu and Lakshmi, Narayan, right? But in our Gaudiya understanding, all the names of the divine, first and foremost, are names of Krishna. And then they apply to other forms. So Vishnu, the word Vishnu, just that, means all-pervading. So, and for example, in the Rasa Lila, this is mentioned, when Krishna is dancing with the gopis, he's manifesting in between each one of the gopis and moving very fast and dancing, and all of them are thinking, oh, he's dancing with me. And the word Vishnu is invoked to refer to Krishna. The very last verse from the Rasa Lila, the Rasa Panchadhyaya, these 5 chapters, Vikriditam Brajavadubir idam cha Vishnu. Tradambitanu Shrunuyat Atavarnayetya Bhaktim Param Bhagavati Pratilavekam Hridrogamasva Pahinatya Chirena Dhira. This is a Falashruti of the Rasa Lila, the verse which gives the fruit of hearing Rasa Lila properly. And then it's saying, Vikriditam Brajavadubir idam cha Vishnu. for that, it is referring to Vishnu playing with the ladies, the beauties of Braj, with the gopis. So the word to refer to Krishna doing Rasa Lila, there is Vishnu. Of course, someone from the Sri Sampradaya will say, yes, that's Vishnu in his avatar as Krishna. No? That's why Vishnu is used. They will say from that place. And there's a place for them to say that. No? No? This verse of Bhattan shows that actually it's Vishnu, but in his Lila avatar as Krishna, his playful descent as Krishna. But we will say, no, Vishnu first is a name for Krishna, and who is all-pervading and who is expanding and appearing to each gopi as he does in Rasa Lila, and that's why he's referred to as Vishnu in the Bhagavatam. So from that place you can say, I'm a Vaishnava. If you understand Vaishnava as a name of Krishna, and especially as Krishna in connection to the gopis in Rasa Lila, that's where this name appears. Because also, again, we are not worshipping Krishna alone, so to say. No. Mostly the main deity of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas is, we could say Mahaprabhu, we could say Radha and Krishna. The couple, the divine couple together, Shakti and Shaktiman, united. So again, different options I'm sharing of how we could make the case for keeping the Vaishnava title and how we could explain it otherwise. So I don't know if that helps, makes any sense, Bhadra?
Yes, yes, very much, Maharaj. Thank you very much. It seems that people, not necessarily any practitioners of any Vaishnava line or anything, but just lay people out in the world who've had a little peek into Hinduism to try and understand a little bit about Hinduism, they categorize Krishna as the eighth avatar of Vishnu. It's kind of an established, supposedly established fact. And they don't.
That's a mainstream version, so to say.
Yes, yes.
But again, this is mainstream version as the same way that the mainstream idea of Hinduism is Advaita Vedanta. I mean, for most people, you say Hinduism, they will go or Advaita Vedanta or polytheism or caste system, and they will get stuck in that on the mainstream level. No. Now, if you want to really study the whole thing seriously, you will start to realize, oh my gosh, this is way more complex than what I thought. No, it's not that what I thought. It's way more nuanced, and there is monotheism in India. It's not that it's all monism or polytheism, and there are varieties of monotheism and this and that, and there are different interpretations about different faces of God, and there's a place for each one of them being right. So this validation of subjectivity is there to a point that it may be overwhelming to someone who is not trained in those ideas. You come to proper conception, you will realize, okay, he's thinking Narayana is the supreme, he's thinking Krishna is the supreme, he's thinking, and all of them are right from one place. And for some people, it's like, no, it's not possible. How can you say that? Yes. I mean, in proper Hindu thought, they have no problem with this idea of one and different. No, they are all different forms of God. They are all valid, but there's an underlying unity in all of them. So there is some, I'm not saying every Hindu, but in the proper Hindu thought, there is a complete acceptance of this simultaneous presence of one and many. And if we don't come with that training in our own way of thinking, we may need some time to grasp properly what we call Hinduism is about. In itself, the word Hinduism is I would say, relatively contemporary construct. Is nowhere in the scriptures. There's no word in Hinduism. The closest you get could be the term Sanatana Dharma, which is way more accurate and way more nuanced. It's saying Hinduism. Hinduism just gives the idea of whatever is going on over there in India. Right? So, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Bhadra. We'll go to the next quest, sorry. And let's continue our exploration with Yugal Kishore Prabhu. Nice to see you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for such beautiful questions so far. really special. I didn't know that it was going to be such a special occasion. And it makes me want to push that question a little bit further. So if we say that, we are Gaudiyas because we worship Radharani, as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was mentioning, instead of Karshans or Krishnites or whatever, however you want to Latinize that word, would you say that there's within that distinction lies this preference for either Svakiya or parakıya bhav, or is that the word I want? That I'm reading in your inherent and inherited right now. The difference between, Svakiya, is it Svakiya bhava? Okay, and parakıya bhava. And that our lineage somehow prefers this paramour, this you could almost say polyamorous love versus a sort of static like marriage between Radha and Krishna forever in eternity, all time. Maybe you could speak more to that, because I don't understand this fully. This is maybe the most esoteric, one of our most esoteric truths. So how does that difference maybe come out in our parivar or just in our Gaudiya lineage? And like, do other Gaudiya lineages consider themselves Krishnites instead of Gaudiyas?
Yeah, there's all of that is present in different groups and different moods. No, because again, when we say Vaishnavism, let's use the word Vaishnavism for a minute. And Vaishnavism is what is Vaishnavism? To begin with, what is Gaudiya Vaishnavism? Many of us have a very how to say, restrictive and restricting idea of what's Gaudiya Vaishnavism. We have certain mold. This is what it means to be a Gaudiya Vaishnava. But when you have some experience of other Gaudiya Vaishnava groups, other parivars, other affiliations, and there is so much diversity, so many ways in which they do things differently, in which they think differently. I'm not saying absolutely differently, because of course, for some reason, they are all considered Gaudiyas. But beyond the Gaudiya denomination, there are so many expressions of Vaishnavism. Of course, there is sometimes what's called the 4 Vaishnava Sampradayas, and that's a whole different topic because, at least in my opinion, I've been doing some research and going through the research of other researchers, and there's one verse that is ascribed to one Purana, which seems to say, Sampradaya Bihinayet Mantra Nishvalas. That if one does not receive mantra from one of the 4 authorized Vaishnava Sampradayas, one's mantra is fruitless. But actually, from different research, it becomes apparent that line is an interpolation. And by this, I mean that it's not necessarily true that there are only 4 Vaishnava Sampradayas, that we can just limit Vaishnavism to Sri Sampradaya, Madhava Sampradaya, Nimbarka Sampradaya, and Vishnu Swami Sampradaya, no? Or Rudra Sampradaya. We know these 4 names and the 4 main acharyas of them. So there are other Vaishnava groups. If you are in Vrindavan, especially Vrindavan, it's a hub of Vaishnavism mostly, but there's so many groups there. They're not only Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Gaudiya Vaishnavas are not even the majority, in Vrindavan. You have Vallabh Sampradaya, Swami Haridas Sampradaya, of course, these 4 Sampradayas I'm referring, Radha Vallabh Sampradaya, anyhow, many. And for me, in one sense, it's beautiful to see how they are all coexisting together. They're all living in the same town together, so to say, and somehow they're not killing each other, which happens so much in the name of religion, in the name of we are in the right group, you are in the wrong one. And here you have all this melting pot of, I don't know how many groups of people doing different things in different ways, all put together in one town. It sounds like a social experiment or something, right? Let's see what happens. Let's put together all these groups to live for decades and centuries, and what will happen? And they are not killing each other. Wow, each of them are flourishing and blossoming in their own practice, and at the same time appreciating what everyone else is doing. No, I cannot imagine each one of these groups is living in Vrindavan in their own respective like circle, but they hate one another, and I think everyone else is bogus except for them. How much you can continue living together in that way for centuries, as it has been the case. In fact, on the contrary, it's another very nice tradition, mostly in Vrindavan, because you have this, again, melting pot of so much diversity, is that whenever a different sadhus invited to speak Harikatha, many times sadhus come from different groups and different sampradayas, Bhalab Sampradaya and this Sampradaya. And each of them, generally, if we are talking about scholarly sadhus, they are familiar with the Siddhanta of every other school. So whenever they're speaking Harikatha, they will touch upon different points from the different schools, because acknowledging that in the audience there are members of the different schools, or they are talking with members of different schools. So in their own presentation, they will not only say, so according to my tradition, Gaudiya Vaishnavism, this is like this. But they will quote their tradition, but in that context will refer to what an acharya of other tradition is saying, and in that way create this reconciliation, this harmonizing, beautiful, inspiring mood. So maybe I'm going a little bit astray, but I think it's related to the question. And going more specifically to your question regarding Svakiya, parakıya. Of course, we should be very careful about not downplaying any of that. No, even if we will say in the Gaudiya Sampradaya, the main emphasis may be on parakıya, that doesn't mean that Svakiya is bad. No, Svakiya means someone wants has a, again, as you said, Jugal Kishore, in brief, Rupa Goswami unfolds this in detail, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and more in Ujjval Nilamani. Svakiya means you have a relationship with Krishna, which is a romantic relationship and married relationship. You are legally allowed to love Krishna romantically in the eyes of society in the Leela. So to say, Swakiya. Swa means one's own. You belong to Krishna. No? So you are legally married. You are for one another. Parakıya means you belong to someone else. But despite that, you are in love with Krishna. So that adds this whole layer of transgression of principles and rules and regulations, all for the sake of loving Krishna, all for the sake of giving him pleasure, not for the sake of one's selfish interest, which will make the whole thing abominable, but all for the sake of giving. There's every possibility of being caught red-handed in your attempt to meet with Krishna in a clandestine way, but the gopis are willing to do that, to embark upon that journey every single day for eternity, with all the risk that it entails, with the risk of reputation, as Krishna says in the Gita. No, Arjuna says in the Gita, to receive infamy is worse than death. So the gopis are willing to die thousands of times at every second for the sake of Krishna. Basically, that's the idea. They are willing to risk everything for the sake of love. So Svakiya rasa implies a lesser degree of that risk element. With this, we are not saying that's bad. Again, there's a place for that in eternity. In fact, of course, as you are reading in my book, there is a whole discussion about Jiva Goswami talking about Svakiya in Golok Vrindavan, and some acharya thinking that parakıya happens only on earth, and in Golok Vrindavan it's only Svakiya, although that's not the mainstream belief in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, but there's some place to make that point. That's another conversation. And regarding parakıya, of course, because you were asking in relation to us being Gaudiyas and not Krishnas and being more concerned with Radha, of course, that doesn't mean we discard Krishna. being concerned with Radha means we care for Krishna in the context of caring for her, so to say. We care for both, basically. Radha is the love personified. It's a long conversation, but we should always keep in mind this bit dynamic, one and then different, one and different, one and different. So Radha and Krishna are two, but Radha and Krishna are one at the same time. You cannot separate them entirely. So it's the same absolute becoming two for the sake of Leela, becoming two without, not in a point of time, for the sake of relishing love and interaction. So if in Gaudiya Vaishnavism we care especially for love personified in the form of Sri Radha and allowing Krishna to have that experience, that mostly, of course, Sri Radha is in parakıya bhav with Krishna, in our opinion. She's married with her, what we may call so-called husband, Abhimanyu, but having this extramarital relationship with Krishna. And the whole Leela revolves around making that union between Radha and Krishna successful on a daily basis with all the risks that it entails. But Rupa Goswami speaks, of course, parakıya bhav doesn't only mean that you are serving Sri Radha and want her to meet with Krishna. You can also be in parakıya bhav and look for a personal, direct romantic association with Krishna, which again is not so much, we will say, the cup of tea of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, but it's more, again, tat bhavichatmika and sambhoge chamai. These are the technical terms that Rupa Goswami mentioned. Sambhoga icha mai, madhurya rasa, or parakıya bhav, which means parakıya bhav, which is characterized, which is of the nature of sambhoga icha, of a desire, icha for sambhoga, for personal union with Krishna in romantic mode. That's a type of parakıya. And then you have tat bhavichatmika, which means a type of love which is characterized by wishing not so much direct relationship with Krishna, but facilitating the union between Radha and Krishna. So that's the main emphasis in our tradition. Sometimes that's called Radha Dasyam, Manjari Bhav, Bhavolasrati, different names. So again, when I say that's the main emphasis in our tradition, I'm not saying that's the only emphasis. We are zooming into, okay, the specificity of parakıya bhav, and I'm going to the camera here, and but as much as we zoom in, we have to zoom out and realize, okay, but at the same time, there is place for so many other varieties and expressions of love and devotion that are not necessarily, again, even romantic in nature. Like we were referring to the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, first book of the Gaudiya Sampradaya. And there, the main character of the book is Gopakumar, who is in Svakiya. So it's interesting. First book of the Sampradaya, and it's pointing to something other than romantic love to show that's also possible. And Mahaprabhu is coming, and he's making basically everything possible. By everything, I don't mean everything and anything, and you just concoct your own thing. But there's so much breadth in Gaur Leela and so much depth at the same time. While it has its specific pursuit, and Mahaprabhu is tasting something very unique and specific, and by extension distributing that to the world, but that's not ruling out any other form of devotional expression, right? So yeah, I don't know if that helps, if I'm
That's
missing
exactly
something.
where I wanted you to go next. How does Gora reveal these various truths? Because I mean, of course, Gaudiya refers directly to Chaitanya, not directly to Radha. So I mean, that's a question I've had in my mind for many, 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 many years. Almost like there's two religions. One is around Krishna and Radha, and the other one's around Sri Chaitanya. For me, as someone who has not read the whole many treatises of all of our scriptural canon, but I don't want to cheat Karneshwari out of her question time.
No, I say a few words and then we go to Karneshwari to close the session. We have a few minutes. There's a lot to say about that. And there's a lot which somehow has not been said about that and deserves to be said about that, in terms of exploring the possibilities of relating to Mahaprabhu, Sri Chaitanya Dev in eternity, and also the importance of not creating a dualistic, fragmented vision of Krishna Lila and Gaur Lila. As much as they are different, they are one and the same. And I know that's difficult to integrate, but that's the whole Achintya Bheda metaphysics that we revolve around. So you cannot speak about Radha and Krishna and Mahaprabhu or Gaur Gadadhar as entirely different. They're just the same personalities in a slightly different emotional disposition. So if you, Jugal Kishore, have an emotional disposition now, and 2 hours later you have a different emotional disposition, okay, in one sense I can say, oh, he's a different person now. He's in such an anger now. He was so peaceful 2 hours ago. You're someone else. Sorry to give that example. I don't want to make you angry.
No, that's
but,
true.
Okay. For some reason that came. But you are the same person, just a different emotional disposition. So it's difficult for us to keep that in mind when we are talking about Mahaprabhu, Radha-Krishna, Nrsimhadev, Vishnu, Vamandev, and to keep in mind, they're all the same person. They are just going through different emotional chapters. And when they go through emotional chapters, he, she, the same person, does though to such a degree that it affects his whole being, and he takes a different shape altogether, different color. A few arms, extra arms appear, pop up, a few others disappear. No, for us, we go through different emotional disposition, but if someone takes us a picture, we are slightly the same person in the picture always. But because our capacity for emotional immersion is not the same as that of Bhagavan. But when he goes through emotional varieties, that alters his whole being, so to say, in one sense. No. So he appears like Matsya, he appears like Kurma, he appears like Brahman, he appears like all these forms, right? Which are unlimited because he has unlimited emotional dispositions. So Mahaprabhu is a very complex personality because, of course, his main business is to taste Radha Bhav. That's very clearly mentioned in our tradition. But that doesn't mean that he's only tasting Radha Bhav. Sometimes he's tasting Nrsimha Bhav. Sometimes he's tasting Balaram Bhav. Sometimes he's tasting Krishna Bhav. Sometimes he's tasting Manjari Bhav. Sometimes it's like complicated. Very complex personality. And again, different devotees will relate to him according to their own affinity also. There's place for people saying, oh, I relate more when Mahaprabhu exhibits Nrsimha Bhav. I have that affinity myself. I relate more when he and overtly sits in the throne of Shiva Sangam playing this Mahaprakash Lila for more than 20 hours, showing himself as Bhagavan with all awe and opulence and showing different. Anyhow, again, there's place for that. The main emphasis, that said, is his side of Krishna, especially from Chaitanya Charitamrita. That's Gaudiya Vaishnava, the main hagiography that we embrace, despite there being seven main hagiographies of Mahaprabhu. Chaitanya Charitamrita is seen as the culmination of them. It's the last one chronologically, and in one sense, we will make a case for it being the last one conceptually in terms of blossoming and unfolding of what's being given in the previous ones, the ones written by Lochan Das Thakur, Kavi Karnapur, Murari Gupta, Vrindavan Das Thakur, and so on. Each of them are bringing their own contributions and adding layers to who Mahaprabhu is about. But we'll say in Chaitanya Charitamrita, that's the ultimate explosion in terms of who we are talking about here. And Chaitanya Charitamrita really focuses deeply in Mahaprabhu being Krishna, Radha-Krishna, Radha-Bhava Dyuti Subalitam Nami Krishna Sarupam. Krishna embraced by the hail of Sri Radha and experiencing her inner mood. Her Besh and her Abesh. Besh, her external halo, Abesh, internal absorption in her Bhav. So And Bhaktivinoda Thakur will say that, Srila Sridhar Maharaj will say that, many others will say that. Some devotees have more affinity. For those who have affinity to serve Radha and Krishna in Vrindavan, they go there. You attain the goal your Istadev is marking. For those who have the affinity to serve Mahaprabhu in Navadvip, you go there. For those who have the affinity to serve Radha and Krishna and Mahaprabhu, you go both places. Which again, both places are at the same time one. As much as Vrindavan and Navadvip are one, as much as Mahaprabhu and Krishna are one, as much as Gadadhar and Radha are one, and they are different, but they are one. And again, this is way beyond how we can calculate that in our minds, because there is not some type of like, how to say, bipolar split. That what I will be two people, different people for eternity. How to accommodate that? Better I remain here with my. I mean, I have enough trouble with my one single personality. Will we be two in eternity? How to make that a compute? Again, don't try to enter there through your head. That's not how it works. First, we have to be deeply grounded in the non-dual unity between Krishna Lila, Gaur Lila, Mahaprabhu, Bhagavan Sri Krishna, and so on and so forth. And gradually, we will, by realization, we will get a glimpse of how this is possible in a healthy way, without any type of unnecessary split. So, but yeah, there are different devotees in Gaur Lila. In Gaur Lila, you find even Hanuman as Murari Gupta, and his sister Devi is Ramachandra in Ayodhya. No? But he appears in Gaur Lila, and he loves Mahaprabhu. So there is place for a Ram Bhakta to join the Gaudiya Sampradaya, even though if they have no special affinity towards Krishna Lila in Braj, they can connect with Mahaprabhu and have their connection there. It's broader than what we may think, actually. And of course, I hope that happens at some point, but I have this idea in mind of writing a few books on Gaur Lila, Nitya Navadip, and all these intricacies. There are like at least 2-3 books have to be written, not one one book of 2,000 pages. So yeah, there's so much to say, and there's so much to explore many times, and I won't go into details now, but many times Gaur Lila is just seen as a means to Krishna Lila, as a bridge. Oh, so it's a little bit utilitarian. Okay, Mahaprabhu came, wrote Harinam Sankirtan to everyone. Thank you so much, Mahaprabhu, for your mercy. Now I go to Krishna Lila. And Gaur Lila is just a temporary like means or bridge happening on earth. But there is a lot to say about Nitya Navadvip, or the existence of an eternal possibility of relating and serving Mahaprabhu in transcendence. And how in that serving Mahaprabhu, of course, you have direct access to Krishna Lila. Again, you cannot separate the two. When you analyze what's going on in Mahaprabhu's heart, it's all about Krishna Lila also. You cannot put the two in separate compartments. That's as far as I can say today, if it's okay. So we have some minutes for Karuneshwari's question before.
May I make one comment quickly?
You are insatiable, Jugal Kishore.
I can't help myself. I am.
And I'm saying that as a public congratulation. So go ahead.
Well, I made it clear to everybody who happened to listen to my confession of sorts that like I've never fully distinguished myself from not being a Christian anymore. I still identify as a Christian. And all I want to say is this: we're quite lucky in our Gaudiya faith to have so much to pull on in terms of these 7 biographies of Sri Chaitanya. I mean, the church, unfortunately, systematically got rid of any apocryphal writings, and it's very hard to come by alternate stories of Jesus. Here, Hinduism has been able to embrace that Achintya Beta philosophy, to not throw away what they don't agree with what not everyone agrees with. So we are so lucky.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that reminder of our, not to develop any superiority complex, but to be humbled by that grace, but also, of course, be committed, because we have all that at our disposal, but what we're doing with that, because we can totally misrepresent such a gift and be absolutely narrow-minded and sectarian in our presentation and conception of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. But yeah, if we are honest and sincere, we will realize I have no actual reason to be such. On the contrary, there's so much breadth and broad-mindedness and richness of revelation. So that should keep us very humble, very fluid, very appreciative. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for the reminder. Karuneshwari, your turn now.
There's such wonderful questions that I'm sort of reluctant to like take
Yours
it.
will be as wonderful, no problem.
I don't know. I'm actually still trying to understand my own question, what to speak of asking you to answer it. But it's coming from that article I read recently that you'd written on Archana. And when I read that article recently, it reminded me that I already had this question. So you were explaining in that article, as far as I understood it, that the Kanishta, he only is able to see Krishna in the deity. And everything apart from the deity in his particular temple, that's not Krishna. And then as he progresses and makes advancement, he starts to see that Krishna is in other deities and other temples and then in other people. And, till it gets to the point you were making in every atom, and where is Krishna not? So my question is, how would the relationship to deity worship begin to change and shift as one progresses? Because I know that, Prabhupada really strongly makes the point that in other traditions, at a certain point, they'll discard deity worship. They used it only as a means to an end. And then when they reach their liberation, they don't need the deity anymore. And that's an offensive mentality. But I think where I'm trying to get to with my question is that not that we would ever reach a point of, not like that kind of mentality or anywhere near it, but just that in the beginning, if we go to the deity, because that's the only place where we can really perceive Krishna, as that starts to change and it's no longer the only place where we really perceive Krishna, would that bring about a natural shift in our relationship with deity worship? If that makes sense as a question.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, I will say that, of course, ideally, deity worship, archanam, of course, the implications of archanam, technically speaking, you can engage in archanam. You need, first of all, to receive Diksha mantras to engage in archanam, to put it technical, strictly speaking. And you receive Diksha mantra from a guru. So my point is, the implications of you worshiping the deity is that you are doing so under the guidance of someone else. And that someone else is accompanying you in that process. So you gradually progress from that idea of finding Krishna only in the altar to seeing Krishna in others and everywhere, and there's not a place he's not. So I'm saying this because, again, it's important. It's not just, okay, because if not, if I'm just conducting myself very whimsically, let's put it that way, and I don't know, go to Loi Bazaar and get my pair of deities and start my worship and completely not caring for anything, probably, yeah, we may not necessarily end up in the best possible way. But if one is conducting oneself with certain guidance, I will say that the role of the guru, the teacher in this case, will be, okay, you're worshiping the deity now. In this precise moment, you feel Krishna's. Sometimes there are different ways to say that, of course. Now, when we say, okay, the Kanishta Bhakta or the neophyte only perceives Krishna in the deity, that's a way of putting it. But another way of putting it will be, he perceives Krishna's presence mostly in the deity than in other places. No, doesn't necessarily to be black and white, like only in the deity. Okay, there can be some extreme neophyte Vaishnava who just Krishna is there and so on, like hyper localized experience of God, only there. He cannot be anywhere else. For some others, it will be, okay, he's mostly here. Somewhere else I get a glimpse of that, but mostly here. So that may be still a Kanishta nuance. Eventually you start to feel God's presence on a very equal, similar level outside of the altar, because again, the altar, and again, this comes with the guidance that the guru has to provide to the disciple is, okay, you are starting now with this archanam, with the deity in the altar, but in one sense, the altar has to be universalized. In one sense, you have to understand that Krishna is everywhere. In other altars, in other hearts, you don't have that vision now, that's fine. But in theory, know that that's the case. No, that's the case. So the guru has to bring those reminders from day one, I will say, to the disciple. No? That, for me, that article that I wrote on those verses by Kapila Dev in third canto of the Bhagavatam, I will say, for me, a guru that is introducing a disciple to Archanam, part of the introduction should be sharing those verses. Not sharing my article, but sharing those verses. No, what Bhagavan himself, Kapila, is saying. No, someone, as you know, someone worships. There are many verses, and they're intense, interesting. But if someone worships the deity, but neglects other people, other human beings, that worship is basically useless. That's kind of the gist of all those verses. Now, if you engage in archana and you worship Bhagavan in his Trimurti form, but do not know how to relate to other people, do not know how to see God's presence in them, then what's the purpose of that archana? No? That puts archana very clearly in context, what archana is really about. Because if not, then I've seen that a few times. You can become, again, you can hyper-localize Krishna in your deity, in your altar. You can become kind of obsessed with doing everything in your altar. But then when the curtain closes and you have to relate to anyone else, many times I've seen people very dysfunctional in basic human dealings. And when the altar opens, it seems that they have this super bhav and connection and esoteric thing. But then the altar closes and they don't know what to do. So that kind of feels like, hey, you are using the altar as an escapism. You are escaping into the altar instead of the altar being a way of connecting to the whole of reality. You are just running from reality into the altar. And if that's the case, then you cannot call that an altar. So do you follow my point? Externally, there may be altar, there may be puja, there may be all the Raj Bhoga, all the ingredients and paraphernalia in place. But from which place we are doing that? Is from a place that is expanding the presence of the altar, is from a place that is extending the presence of the deity more and more gradually, but more and more. We have to, Phalena Farichyate, you judge a tree by its fruit. So we have to pay attention. Is the fruit coming? I'm doing this archanam with the right conception, because if not, and that's why archanam, as with any other aspect of bhakti, should be ideally guided by someone on some level. We should receive some proper education, like what we are doing, basically. It's not like I just bought a pair of deities in the market and put them on the corner at home and that's archanam. Not necessarily. It may be idol worship. If you are using the deities as escapism, that's idolatry. That's not worship, right? So there are so many considerations. So what warrants a smooth, healthy transition from a Kanishta perspective of over-idealizing God's presence in the altar to one in which you gradually are present to God's presence everywhere, is, again, that you are engaging with proper sambandha, I will say, with proper orientation, with proper, that's what I call guidance, proper education about what you are doing. I mean, it's with all respect and not criticizing anyone, but sometimes there are devotees who may be practicing for 20, 30 years, and in many ways they don't know what they're doing. No. No. Like so many times I hear Maharaj, I'm chanting for 20, 30 years, and this is not working, I'm not feeling anything. and you start to inspect, so, okay, so what you are doing? And they will reply, oh, I'm chanting. Yeah, I get the point, but what you're doing? What do you mean by chanting? What do you mean? What's chanting? And who you are chanting for? Who is your Istadev? Where are you focusing your chanting? Is there a focus? What's the mood? Why you are chanting for? What's your idea of the divine? And all the things that, if they are not clearly solved into yourself, you can continue to practice for decades and millions of lifetimes, and there won't be the proper result. Sometimes I cannot tell you how many times I hear this question, but Maharaj, how to explain that someone is practicing chanting for 30 years and still doing that? And I at one point, like, stop thinking like that. Stop thinking that it's a cumulative thing, that the more years you do something, the better you are. Not necessarily. It's not quantity, it's quality. And as I say, if you are practicing with the wrong conception, with the wrong ideas, the more you practice, the worse. Try to get my point. If I'm chanting, thinking that Krishna is a angry daddy, that I may need to be appeased at every single moment, sorry if I'm putting a little extreme, the more I do that, the more I practice, the more I'm reinforcing that pattern, the more distorted is my picture of Krishna. And the more distorted will be my practice and the fruit of the practice. So it's not like the more you do it, the better. Not necessarily. So sometimes we have to get out of this like quantity cumulative thing that, okay, 20 years, 30 years practicing from a respectful place. I don't care about how many years you have been practicing. I care how you have been practicing, from which place you have been practicing. Have you been practicing? Well, because if not, it's just 20, 30 years of what? No, it can be parade, facade, escapism, spiritual bypassing, evasiveness, or just nothing with bad intention, but with wrong ideas, with wrong conceptions. And we have been talking about this in the series of lectures I gave in Mayapur, rediscovering our relationship with Krishna or something like that. I'm mentioning how Bhaktivinoda Thakur makes this point. He says all these anarthas we have, first one he mentions tattva vibrama, to be bewildered about tattva, to be confused about reality, about what is what, who am I, what is Krishna, what is my relationship with him, what is, if I have wrong ideas about that, those are anarthas to be uprooted. Sometimes we think anartha means lust, greed, envy, and I'm not saying they are not, but the first one Bhaktivinoda Thakur's mentioned is to have wrong sambandha, wrong conception, wrong sense of relationship, distorted idea of the object of your love. All that are anarthas that unless and until you uproot them, you are watering them. That's Mahaprabhu's example with the vine and the upasakas, or the weeds that need to be uprooted. He say those weeds may look similar to the bhakti lata, to the bhakti vine. Externally, it seems, oh, it's bhakti, it's with tilak, it comes dressed as a devotee. But there may be weeds that need to be uprooted. If you do not discern about them, you are watering. In the name of watering the bhakti vine, you are also watering those weeds that need to be uprooted. And that becomes an anartha that is happening in the context of bhakti. Externally, it looks like bhakti. Internally, it's an anartha that needs to be uprooted. So we need, that's why we need, again, proper guidance. Proper guidance means proper conception, proper sambandha, proper sense of relationship, how to relate with the practice, how to relate with God, how to relate with myself, how to relate with everyone, how to understand what I'm relating with, because it's all about relationality, right? Everything is interconnected, everything is entangled in quantum language. So what's the relationship that everything has with everything? I need to take some time to be educated about that. If I just rush into chanting and practicing, probably I'm not doing neither of those. and sambandha is practice. Bhakti, sambandha is an aspect of bhakti. It's not getting educated in sambandha. Is not bhakti, is jnana, and you're a jnani and you are not a devotee. That in itself is an anartha to think like that. that in itself means that you need to be educated. So we need to be educated. When there is proper orientation, then Archana or any of these services will gradually move us from stages of more narrow-mindedness to more all-embracing, encompassing perspectives where we perceive the presence of Bhagavan more and more. So it doesn't happen magically. That's my point, no? Again, magical thinking, no? As Bhakti Rasa talked some time ago, no? It shouldn't happen. Like, again, sometimes about to think, okay, I've been chanting for 20, 30 years, nothing's going on, but still waiting for my magic. Not necessarily, again. So we need to do the necessary for things to happen, for us to have an experience, for us to have a change of heart. And many times the change of heart begins with a paradigm shift, with a willingness to gain a new perspective on things, to the willingness of challenging our current understanding of things. If we are not willing to challenge our current understanding of things, probably we won't make much progress. We are not remaining in a liquid state. We are not willing to be molded by higher perception. We are not willing to be disciples or students forever. So that's what it takes. That's the fire we need to enter into and remain in. That's the very first word in the universe, right? Tapas, tapas, tapas. Tapas means fire. So we are meant to become fire. Okay, some words. I hope that helps somehow.
Yeah, that was really helpful. It was like a different answer or direction than I was thinking it might be, but it still answered it. So
yeah. I know
yeah.
it. I know it was not the normal way to answer that question. So sorry for.
But it still answered it, so that's the main point. Thank
Okay,
you.
that's an important thing. Okay, thank you to all of you. Sri Satchidanand Gaur Hari Ki Jai, Sri Harinam Prabhu Ki Jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Gaur Premanand Hari Hari Vancha Kalpataru Vishcha Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha.